Hey guys, and welcome back. Let's continue our multiplayer game creation journey by letting players create or join rooms. So what are rooms? It's a way to group players into a particular session. For example, if I only want to play with my brother, I'll create a room with a secret name, which I'll share with my brother, so he can join and we can play together. Alright, so I've gone ahead and modified my main menu scene. In it, we've got two UI input fields and two buttons, one for creating rooms and the other for joining existing rooms. Again, take as much or as little time as you want with this. Next up, let's make a second C# script called main menu, which will handle the creation and joining of rooms. Let's also make an empty game object called main menu. Lastly, let's drag and drop our main menu script onto our newly created game object. Okay, so in the script, I will add the Unity engine.ui namespace, which will give us the possibility to do UI stuff from within the script. We'll then make two public input field variables, one for join inputs and the other for create inputs. Let's begin with creating rooms. I'll make a public void function called create room. We're making this function public since we'll be calling it from our create room button when it gets clicked. Like most scripts which we'll be creating for this game, we need the photon.pun namespace. To create a room, we simply need to type photonnetwork.createRoom, and between the parentheses we can pass in the name of the room, which will be whatever is written in the create input fields, so createinput.text. Now, since we're creating a two-player game, we need to make a room that limits the number of players that can join to 2. To do so, we need a new namespace called photon.realtime. With that done, we can create a new set of room options that I'll call room options. Options include making the room visible to others, public or private, and of course setting a player limit. So in our case, we'll type options.maxPlayers equals 2. Lastly, pass in the options when you create a new room. That's it for room creation. So to recap, we created a public function called create room that will get called automatically whenever we click on our create room button. Inside this function, we are creating a new room with the name of it being whatever we typed inside of the create input fields. And we're also passing in our room options that limits the room to 2 players max. Alright, so now let's allow other players to join rooms. So likewise, we will make a public void join room function that will get called automatically once we click on our join room button. And in here, type photonnetwork.joinRoom. What room are we joining? Well, whatever room name we typed in our join input fields. Now, once we join a room, we want to transition to the game scene. To do so, we'll utilize the public void onJoinedRoom function, which you guessed it, is automatically called when you successfully join an existing room. Like in the last video, to be able to use this function, we need to derive from the monobehavior pun callbacks, and not just monobehavior. Note that when you create a room, you also join it, so this function will also get called. Within this function, we'll type photonnetwork.loadLevel, and between the quotation marks, type the exact name of the scene you wish to load. So in my case, that will be game. So you might be asking yourselves, why photonnetwork.loadLevel instead of scenemanager.loadScene? Simply put, whenever you want to load a scene where there will be other players, you need to use this version. If not, you'll encounter some issues. Alright, so let's quickly recap. When we'll be clicking on the join room button, this join room function will get called. Inside of it, we're simply joining the room that we wrote down inside of the join room input fields. Then we have got this onJoinedRoom function that will get called automatically by Photon when we join a room, or when we create one, since we also join the room that we create. In here, we're just transitioning to the game scene. With the script nicely saved, we can head back into Unity and drag and drop the input fields into the correct slots. Then, select the create room button and add an onClick event to it. Drag and drop the main menu object into this empty slot and finally choose the create room function. So now when you click on this button, that function will get called. Same for join room, except choose the join room function, of course. Now let's quickly create a new scene called game, and just like in the last video, each time we create a new scene, we have got to go to the build settings and add our newly created scene to the scenes to build section. I'll place it after the main menu scene. And there we go, we can now go ahead and test all this out. One easy way to do this on a single machine is to build a game with Control B. So now you can simultaneously play inside the editor and in a game window. Of course, if you want to test out your game on separate machines, you can very well do that. So there are two instances of our game, and both are first of all connecting to the server on our loading scene, before transitioning to the main menu. So now I'll create a room called test in this build, and as you can see, we're getting transitioned to our game scene. And then if you try joining in the editor version by typing test in the join room input fields, you'll see that you also get transitioned to the game scene. Awesome, creating and joining rooms works perfectly. However, it's a little hard to tell since there are no visual representation of the players. Even though there are 2 players in this room, all we see is a blank background. So our next goal is to spawn a player character in our game.